What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Danelle Hallan, and I am back with another true crime video and a pretty dang exciting announcement. And if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you would have already known about this. But if you don't know, I finally have turned this content into a podcast. You guys have been asking me for years and years, literally bless every single one of you that has asked me. I've had people ask me for years in a row at CrimeCon, like the same person. I've had people in my DMs. I totally understand that everyone's not a very visual person and they would rather have just the audio alone. So you guys can go and find Crime Bit by Danelle Hallan anywhere that you like to enjoy your podcasts. It's on Amazon Music. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, like the whole 9 yards, the whole shebang. It should be there for you guys. I'll make sure to link it down below as well. If you could please go and give me a follow on all of those platforms, leave me a 5-star review. That definitely wouldn't hurt to help me grow. I would very much appreciate it. And essentially, I'm just going to be taking my content here and just having it in audio form on other places. And I'm also considering adding in another smaller segment to the podcast that's a little more conversational, possibly just smaller cases, and something that is just exclusive to the podcast. So definitely go and check it out. Thank you to everyone who has patiently waited for me to finally do this. Now on to today's case. And this one is a really tough one. It is very graphic. It is incredibly tragic. And I will be going pretty in detail in an autopsy report about a very disturbing death. So this is your warning now. Viewer discretion is advised. But this case has to get out there. People have to know about it because someone is keeping a secret. Now, I initially heard about this case from John Lorden when I was at CrimeCon. He had covered it on his channel, and we were having conversations with a few different people about current cases that were sticking out to us. And he started to describe this case, and my jaw hit the floor. And the more he said, the more unbelievable it became. And it stuck in my head so much that the moment I got back to my hotel room later on, I immediately spent the night looking it up because I was just flabbergasted. We are going to be speaking about the suspicious death of 19-year-old Noah Alexander Presgrove. His lifeless body was discovered naked on the side of a rural road in the early morning hours of September 4th, 2023. Now, you guys, the rumor mill on this one is out of pocket, and due to very little information being released from authorities, majority of this information that I have is coming straight from Noah's family, social media posts from those with information, news outlets that have managed to get their hands on something, and opinions of experts that have looked into the case. So take that information with you as you proceed into this video. I want to make it so very clear that so far they have not announced any persons of interest or any suspects. So I am not accusing anyone of anything. It is really messy out there, honestly. So I just wanted to make sure that it's understood before I proceed forward. So let's start at the beginning. Noah Presgrove was born on May 14th, 2004 in Oklahoma to Victor Presgrove and Casey Elliott. And he grew up in a big blended family in the town of Comanche, which is an itty-bitty town right on the edge of the Oklahoma-Texas border. And when I say itty-bitty, I mean there's like a total population of just under 1,400 people. And I think that that has played a huge part in the rumors and speculation that have run rampant. Noah grew up around the same kids his whole life. He grew up around the same families. He did move around a little bit and briefly lived in Texas, but Comanche was always his home base. Now, Noah was very active in church and in school. He played both soccer and baseball when he was younger. And then as he went into high school, he ended up lettering in football, wrestling, track, and cross country. He was a very athletic person, and he was really good at it. And according to his obituary, he was also spontaneous. He was fearless, a country boy and a ladies' man. He loved the outdoors. He loved the water. He was just a good kid, and a lot of people looked up to him. He was so easy to get along with. His brother Dalen said he was the class clown. He was always playing pranks and making jokes, and this charismatic personality drew everyone into him, and they've shared a bunch of really near and dear photos and videos to their Facebook page that is run by family, which I will have linked down below. And you can just see he's just a goofy, sweet guy. Like, he just loves to have fun. He loves to be around people, loves to see people happy and laughing. So this whole thing is just so tragic. Now, at the age of 17, he emancipated himself and ended up moving in with his grandmother, who played a huge part in raising him. And according to his aunt and his cousin, who are kind of helping to spearhead the search for justice for him, he took the best care of her. And he wasn't only taking care of his grandmother, but he also lived in the same house as his great-grandmother. He made sure that all of the housework was done that she couldn't do. He took out the trash, he mowed the lawn, he was the handyman. You could always rely on his help when you needed it. In May of 2023, just months before his death, he graduated from Comanche High School and he was trying to figure out his future plans. He wasn't really sure what career path he wanted to go down, so he didn't want to waste money on school. So he decided to take the year off, figure himself out. He dabbled with the idea of maybe becoming a welder, amongst a few other things, but it seems that he really had his eyes and his heart set on joining the military. So he planned to wait until a family member of his graduated in 2024 so they could enlist together, something that unfortunately he never got the chance to do. This brings us to Labor Day weekend of 2023. Now, Noah had originally made plans this weekend with his aunt and his uncle to attend Rocklahoma together. This is a big music festival, and in a nutshell, it's a giant party. And last minute, Noah decided that he wanted to bring a friend along, but this friend was only around 15 or 16 years old. And Noah's aunt shot down this idea right away because she's like, look, I know this kid, but I don't know his parents. And she just didn't want the responsibility of that, especially in an environment like Rocklahoma. So Noah was faced with this decision of, does he still go and leave his friend behind, or does he make other plans? And he ultimately decided to make new plans. Now, that Friday night, he went with family and friends to the local high school football game, and that is when a Snapchat announcing a party started to make its rounds. A friend of Noah's was turning 22. She put out an invitation to her home in Terral, Oklahoma for a 4-day party to celebrate. And from my understanding, her family has money. They've got ties to a lot of people. They've got a lot of land, like they own majority of it down in that area. And not only that, but Noah decided to go because the birthday girl who was hosting it was actually sisters with his best friend's girlfriend, and his best friend's name is Jack. The party was heavily documented all weekend long, with numerous videos posted showing everyone playing beer pong, and they were, playing the slap game where they slap the crap out of each other, and girls were signing their names on Noah's butt and drawing on his back, like all these things that are very typical for college parties and like high school parties. But something tragic happened in the early morning hours of that following Monday, September 4th. Noah's life was stolen from him, and someone out there knows exactly what happened and isn't coming forward. At 5:53 a.m. Labor Day morning, a semi-truck driver was heading south on US 81 in Jefferson County, which is right there near Terral. Now, this is a 2-lane road. It is unlit, rural, and it goes straight down into Texas and is surrounded by just endless farmland. Now, the semi-truck driver ended up noticing what he thought was possibly a person laying on the southbound shoulder of the road. This was about a mile north of the party that Noah had been attending that weekend. But at this point, it was still too dark outside, so he wasn't entirely sure that he was seeing things right. So he decided to go to the town of Terral, which is just like a hop, skip, jump from this area, to turn around and double check what he saw. Now, when he arrived back in the area, there was now at least one other vehicle. I've seen that there were 2 white vehicles there, but I've not been able to confirm. I've seen it said both ways. I guess it was possibly a white car, but I know for a fact there was a white service truck there. And tragically, he had in fact seen a person in the road. It was the naked and mangled body of 19-year-old Noah Presgrove. 911 was called right away, and I believe the local volunteer fire department was actually the first to the scene, followed by Jefferson County Sheriff's Department around 6:18 a.m. And it wasn't until around 7 a.m. or just before that Noah's family was finally called and notified that Noah had been in an accident. Now, it doesn't seem like anyone told them directly that Noah was deceased, because his brother has said in interviews that he thought he was just badly hurt and potentially going to the hospital. So Noah's father and his brother Dalen hopped in the car to make the 30-minute drive out to meet authorities. But they hadn't been told exactly where Noah was found, so every single turn of the road or hill that they, went over, they held their breath waiting to see what was potentially going to be on the other side. When they finally arrived, the sheriff's department was there along with Noah's best friend Jack that I mentioned earlier, who had also attended the party that weekend, along with Jack's father. Noah's body was covered in a sheet that was slowly soaking with blood. Noah wasn't simply in an accident. This is how they found out that they lost their loved one. And the scene was shocking. Noah was lying on the southbound shoulder of the road in the fetal position, and he was facing towards the field, so away from the road. He was completely naked except for shoes, and even then they were two different shoes, and one of them didn't belong to him. So on one foot he was wearing his own Adidas that they recognized, and the other was a gray Hey Dude. It's a slip-on shoe. Now, just a few feet from his body was a pair of white shorts neatly folded on the ground. There were also 3 broken pieces of a white chain that he wore regularly, and also scattered around his body were his own teeth. There were also clumps of hair around his body. I think one was actually in the lane of the road, and another piece was stuck to his buttocks. And he had a drawing of a stick figure on one of his legs, and his body was severely, severely damaged.
When we show up there, everything's going through our minds of what in the world could, because it doesn't look like a hit and run sort of situation. His pants were folded up on that square mark.
His pants were there. His tooth was right there in that circle.
I believe so, yeah. It just seems weird, the placement of the body, the tooth, the shorts, where they're at. Doesn't look like a hit and run.
From the get-go, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department began to suspect that this was likely a hit and run. Like, they seemed very set that this was what happened. But from what his family was seeing at the scene, the moment they looked at everything and took it all in, that didn't seem to be adding up. They felt that something more had to be going on here. How did he end up in this condition a mile away from the party that he was thought to be at? And why was he naked? And how did his shorts that he maybe had been wearing end up folded beside him? And if they came off, why were his shoes still on? Especially a Hey Dude that's a slip-on shoe. And why did he even have that shoe on when it wasn't his? It just felt like there were too many odd things here for authorities to just quickly sweep it under the rug, slap a label on it, and move on without investigating anything. There were also no tire marks indicating that a car had tried to stop or slowed from a serious impact. There was no car debris littered across the road. There didn't even seem to be blood, at least not much blood anywhere, other than on the sheet that Noah was covered in. There was some obvious pooling of blood underneath of his head, and there was a spot several yards south of his body as well. There was no sign at all that he had been tossed across the road and eventually came to a stop anywhere. An impact would have at least thrown him a few feet away, if not a dozen feet away, and somehow all of his teeth, his necklace, all of his belongings were within a few feet of his body. His family just knew right away that something was not right. And it wasn't until Oklahoma Highway Patrol showed up to take over the case that they too noticed the suspicious state of the scene and Noah's body, and they began to really question what happened. And by the next day, OSBI was working alongside the Highway Patrol, and they announced that they were investigating Noah's death as suspicious, and they planned to investigate the best way they possibly could while awaiting the autopsy results. Now, his family knew that the autopsy results were going to tell a horrific story because they were so disturbed and devastated when they saw him at the funeral home. It appeared as if Noah's skull had been crushed. He had bruises all over the top half of his body. He was very swollen. It looked like he had a broken nose, a broken cheekbone, and his fingertips were shredded almost down to the bone. Whatever happened to him was so extreme that it affected so many different areas of the entire upper half of his body. And somebody was out there with answers and had just left him there to be found. Authorities and his family have since been trying to put together what exactly happened that entire weekend, what happened at the party, who was the last person to see him, and how did he die from such horrific injuries. He didn't even take his own car, so he would have been relying on someone else for transportation. But it seems like the lack of a proper investigation at the start and unwillingness of others to come forward, and also vastly differing stories, may have seriously hindered the case. According to Noah's family, things with the investigation were very shady while the sheriff's department was in charge, which I will say was very briefly. But those first few moments on the scene, when you are trying to lock things down, gather evidence, ask questions, those are arguably some of the most important times during an investigation. And according to his family, as we already know, they were ready to close this down as a hit and run without another look. They had no idea there had been a party that he came from, despite the fact that a party goer, Jack, was at the scene that morning. They also hadn't asked pretty much any questions from what his family has said before coming to this premature determination. So a lot of things that probably should have been done just weren't. Noah's family have said that the scene was never properly secured. There have been accusations that evidence was picked up and moved. People were allowed to remain on the scene when they shouldn't have been, and there was a lack of proper documentation. And despite Noah last being at that party just down the road, that house was never searched. And by the time that Highway Patrol and OSBI were on the case and Noah's family questioned, why wasn't the home checked, they were basically told that since he wasn't found at the home, they had no legal backing to obtain a warrant for it, which was beyond infuriating for his family. That's not to say that anything happened at this party. No one knows for sure, but how could you ever know for sure if you don't check the last place that Noah was known to be? It's about following typical procedures to rule out possibilities, but I guess their hands were tied. Now, the only thing they were able to get of Noah's that was left at the house were his 2 phones that he had brought with him, but his shirt that he wore and his shorts that he had been wearing, his other shoe, his wallet, all of it was unaccounted for. Now, he was apparently wearing a red, white, and blue, like American flag tank top. It was one of his favorites. And according to video from that night, he was wearing a black pair of shorts. But I guess all of that stuff that got left behind mysteriously vanished. And nobody at the party seemed willing to come forward and help out with any sort of information either. There's a lot of rumors and speculation about what may have happened to them, but I'm not even going to dive into that. Now, whether they just couldn't find them, I can't be sure, but either way, it was devastating for Noah's family. Those are important things. He had just been paid. Who knows how much money was in his wallet? Like, that doesn't just vanish. So where did it go? And that could also help tell a story. If this was maybe a robbery gone wrong, if he was on the side of the road, did they take his wallet? It just didn't help to close up any loose ends. Now, knowing that the entire weekend was all over social media and this may lend answers, they went to try and collect whatever information they could from people's stories and Snapchats. Maybe it will show if he was with someone that he barely knew, or there was a fight, or what time exactly did he stop showing up in people's stories, or maybe he can even be seen in the background wandering off. Like, there's no telling what could have been captured on this video because these days every single thing is recorded. But according to Noah's family, when they went to look, allegedly everyone had deleted everything from social media around the time that Noah's body was found, something that people from the party have vehemently denied.
Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation has declared the teen's death as suspicious, adding that they're waiting to receive a cause of death from the medical examiner's office. Presgrove's aunt says their family is also waiting and haven't been given many details.
Because of the investigation, the OHP isn't really releasing a whole lot of information because they don't want it to get out.
The recent high school graduate had plans of joining the service. His family spoke about his passion for sports, adding how he was loved by so many. Now they're asking Presgrove's adoring community to help bring them closure.
I mean, We need to know exactly what happened. There's too many stories out there. Too many.
While also reminding the public of what kind of person her grandson was.
Everybody says they loved him. He was a true friend. So speak out, say something. Stand up for him. He would have stood up for you.
So looking for answers and a timeline, just something at all to base their investigation on, authorities knew that they would have to push more. So they pulled in all of the partygoers for a mass interview. Out of the 40-some people that were in and out of the party that weekend, no one had a clue what could have possibly happened. They all either said they were asleep, or they were still partying, or they were too intoxicated, or they simply just didn't see or hear anything. And Noah's family was devastated that he had been surrounded by people that he thought were his friends, and no one seemed to have any insight. His best friend's girlfriend even claimed to authorities that she didn't even know Noah. Now, I'm not sure if they were all just in a panic. There was a lot of underage drinking, so clearly illegal activity was involved. Maybe they thought they were going to get in trouble. Obviously, the death of someone is also traumatic, but Noah lost his life in a very brutal way. And at that point, I would hope that all of those small insignificant things would go out the window. The only bit of information that they seem to somewhat consistently give was that Noah had been in a rollover ATV accident in the early morning hours of Monday the 4th. And so now they're thinking, well, maybe we're getting somewhere. Maybe something happened in this ATV accident. Like, they thought this was a place to start. But the partygoers all claimed that he walked away from it completely unharmed, and that he had even been checked out by a nurse that was attending the party to make sure that he was okay. They then went on to say that shortly after this accident, Noah got into an argument with someone they said was his girlfriend, causing him to walk out of the house, and no one saw him alive again. Now, Noah's family was grappling with his death at this point, trying to understand how this could have happened while also having zero answers. Maybe the ATV accident was more serious than it was made out to be, or it's also possible he had a TBI. That was one of the first things that I thought, that there was some other lingering injury that you couldn't physically see at first that ended up harming him later on. Maybe he did get into an argument and go walk down the road and collapsed after that and ended up being hit by a car. Or maybe there was something even more sinister happening here, and unfortunately, rumors and tension just continue to grow. Noah's family had hoped to hear from his friends, get answers from them, some sort of insight, or at least some condolences. But according to them, it was radio silence after his death. This is a traumatic thing, so maybe it was just grief or a million other things preventing his friends from coming forward. But allegedly, one of those kids eventually confided in Noah's family that they had been instructed not to speak to them by a parent of one of the kids. They were told from the get-go, allegedly, that Noah's family was infuriated with them, so they needed to stay away. Now, I can't imagine how it feels knowing that the people that may have answers, the only people that last saw your son or your brother or your loved one, aren't coming forward with even the most basic information and are possibly being instructed not to by an adult. And then 2 months after Noah's death, everything changed. The investigators had been and still remain very quiet about the ongoings of the case, but they had finally ruled something out. Court filings that were obtained by the media showed that the investigators believed that the trauma to Noah's body, quote, did not occur from a pedestrian versus vehicle collision. And instead, they believed, based on blood evidence, that Noah had been forcibly pushed from the bed of a moving truck. And that really changes things. His sister has stated in an interview that he was such a good and kind and gentle person, and she didn't know of him having a single enemy. He was not one to talk badly about anyone. One of his coaches from school said, quote, I just picture him coming to practice on his skateboard. I never heard him utter a bad word about anyone. He was fun to be around. So that just added more theories. Was it someone that had been at the party that was just harboring some deep hatred for him? Or was it someone that just so happened to find him wandering along the road? If the truck was moving, someone was driving and someone did the pushing. So now we're also not just talking about one particular potential person, but at least 2. But despite this announcement, it was just one theory that they were working with, and nothing had been solidified yet. There were still so many unanswered questions, and the autopsy had still not been released. After months of interviews, social media posts, a PI working pro bono, and his family speaking to anyone who would talk to them, this is the information that his family has gathered to try and fill in all of the gaps. Noah's family has been able to confirm that he did go to the party on Saturday. He came home to shower and clean up, and then he headed back out to the party that Sunday after being given a ride by a friend. But as with most of the information about what happened at the party, there are several different versions of what should be one very simple story. Rumors swirled that he had been taken to a different town, Waurika, which is like north of Terral. And then there were also rumors that he was given rides by numerous different people, swapped off people, until ultimately the guy that picked him up had to come forward and say, I personally took Noah to the driveway of the party itself. Like, I've got no clue why all these different things are being said. It just made no sense why people would come forward and make things up about this detail. And that's the infuriating thing about this case. Everything down to these small things have been twisted for who knows what reason. And I feel like it has just drained time and energy away from what is really important. Whispers also started that Noah had been in a few arguments over the weekend as well, which obviously could be an issue. And the first person he was in an argument with was actually his best friend, Jack. Jack had been the same one that was one of the first on the scene that early Labor Day morning when Noah was found. And allegedly, Noah and Jack's girlfriend, also the same one that claimed to not even know Noah to authorities, had been talking during the party in a corner, and they had their back to everyone, and it just seemed like a little off to Jack. And so a verbal argument started between Jack and Noah. Now, they've been friends for a while, so according to Jack and possibly other people, they hugged it out. Everything was fine. There were like tears shed in the bathroom or something, and then they all move forward. Now, the second argument was later on in the weekend. I'm not exactly sure what day it was, and this time, some guy accused Noah of stealing and hiding his phone. And as you heard in the beginning of this video, Noah was known for being a prankster, so none of this is really far-fetched, but this guy was really upset about it according to what has been said. So the argument got heated, and the kid actually fish hooked Noah in the mouth, and so Noah bit his finger in response, but I have no idea how this argument ended up resolving. All I know is that this guy's phone was found under someone that had been sleeping on the couch, but I don't know if they made up, if they figured out it was a misunderstanding, or if there was still tension. Who knows? But again, for the sake of this being a suspicious death investigation, it's important to look into possible issues he had with anyone while at the party. Kids at the party continued to claim that Noah decided sometime around 3 a.m. to take out that ATV. And it turned out that the ATV belonged to his best friend, Jack. And according to what has been said, Noah snuck into the room that Jack and his girlfriend were sleeping in to take his keys. After that, Noah and 4 to 5 other guys hopped in for a ride. They were spinning around, having a good time, until all of a sudden that thing rolled over. And so his family, understandably, wanted to know if the ATV was checked out for damage, since there was this lingering possibility that the accident could have been worse than it was being made to seem. But authorities haven't answered if they ever actually looked into it. However, Jack's dad has come forward and he has publicly stated that it was checked. According to Jack's dad, authorities came to the house that same day that Noah was found to look at this ATV. And they even took it, I guess, from the property to do a forensic examination or what have you. And he claims that there wasn't really any damage at all. And within days, authorities gave the ATV back to him. But again, we just don't really seem to know. So back to Noah after the accident. So as I said, people claim that he was unharmed, but despite the fact that he was unharmed, what they did say was wrong was that he was covered in dirt and really drunk. So according to multiple people at the party, they decided to put him in the shower to clean him off and help him out. But just like everything else, we've got a varying array of how this actually occurred. Some of the kids said that Noah was coherent in the shower and joking around, while others said that he was unresponsive. Stories also changed when it came to who and where he took a shower. At first it was 2 guys, then it was just 1 guy friend, then it was 2 of the girls at the party. He's been showered inside, he's been showered or sprayed down outside. I mean, it's just all across the board. They then grabbed a pair of Jack's white shorts and put those on him so that he was dressed after this. And I'm assuming those are the pants that were found near his body when he was discovered. And after this is when Noah got into the argument with the girl that caused him to leave. Now, the girl has been described in sources as being his girlfriend, but according to his family, that was not the case. It was actually the birthday girl and the host of the party, and she was allegedly the one that argued with him. But again, this comes with differing versions. One story that his family has was that Noah attempted to sleep in her bed that night. After he got out of the shower and got dressed, they were like, go to sleep, and that is where he went. And she said, absolutely not, sleep on the floor. And apparently this made him angry, and so he walked out. Another version they got was that the birthday girl actually tried to come on to Noah, and he denied her, said some nasty things, which again led to an argument and him leaving. But regardless of what exactly happened during this argument, everyone seems to claim that he walked out of the house sometime around 3:15 to 3:30 in the morning. So around 2.5 to 3 hours prior to when his body was found. And they're able to kind of corroborate that timeline from a Snapchat that was made by a girl at the party. At 3:41 a.m., a partygoer posted a photo of herself on Snapchat and she's smiling, and it's captioned, well, Noah is missing. When this photo was brought to light, people were upset. If people at the party knew that Noah was missing, why was no one looking for him? Why was nobody calling for help or for an adult? He had no car. He was relying on either staying at this house or being driven home. It just felt really, really callous. And after a ton of backlash, this girl ultimately came forward and said that they had no clue at this point that it was a serious situation. She explained that it was common for Noah to walk off and cool down after things got heated at a party or what have you. I guess it was just a typical thing to expect from him, so no one ever expected for him to never come back. Not only was this photo brought to light, but also some of the allegedly deleted social media posts started to recirculate. According to Noah's family, before they had been deleted, I guess someone out there, several people out there, decided to screenshot or screen record a handful of the videos and pictures. But it doesn't seem like any of these really, gave much insight as to what may have happened to Noah. In the videos, everyone seems to be having a great time. It's an average party. They're breaking boards with their heads. They're messing around outside. They're playing drinking games. But one video did get to Noah's family that caused concern. And this is one video that I have not personally seen. A video was allegedly captured at some point after Noah walked off from the house. And in this video, the birthday girl and her sister, so that's Jack's girlfriend, that according to him had been sleeping at the time, apparently wasn't asleep. And these two girls were arguing on the porch of the home about the fact that Noah disappeared. So again, clearly people knew he was missing. Clearly people were concerned about it, or it was at the very least causing some sort of issue. So why did nobody look for him? And once this information came out, the PI that started working on the case ended up being told that a few people at the party actually had in fact gone out to look for Noah. They hopped on an ATV, they drove up the road right where his body would later be found, and they said that they didn't see him. They didn't see anything at all. Now, I don't have any idea what time this was. We have no time and no way of knowing when Noah got to this location, but whatever time they went out to look for him, they didn't see him there. So they decided at that point to go back to the house. He'd probably come back, and they just continued on with their night or early morning. I just don't personally understand how so much effort was put into taking care of Noah after the ATV accident, and then that worry just kind of vanished. They were so concerned about him being dirty, of all things, that they undressed him, they bathed him, they redressed him, but then they let him walk off into the darkness and nobody went after him. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but it is just so exhausting to see these bad decisions made over and over and over again, and ultimately someone pays for it. Authorities did end up getting warrants for several of the phones to hopefully recover helpful information. And again, that's not saying that anyone is purposely hiding something nefarious, but when you have a group of 40-some teens that are constantly taking videos and photos, there's no telling what might be on them that they just haven't even realized is there. And according to Noah's family, authorities said that it did offer them some information, but they haven't really specified what, and it doesn't seem like it's necessarily anything groundbreaking. Now, with an investigation ongoing, Noah's family still had things to do. They still had to lay him to rest, say goodbye to their brother, their son, their cousin, their grandson, best friend, whoever he was to them, that had been taken far too soon.
Friends and family gather here at the Comanche High School gym for the funeral of Noah Presgrove, a popular recent high school graduate. But as they say goodbye, they're no closer to knowing what happened to him. The parking lot outside the Comanche High School gym, packed. A community dressed in red shirts and high school football jerseys, lining up to say goodbye to a lifelong member of the community.
He was a great kid and an awesome athlete. He was on his way to be an awesome man. He was really kind and would help anyone. I don't have any clue what's going on, really, to be honest with you.
Leaving friends and family to wonder what happened on that highway.
A memorial was held for Noah that was attended by around 1,000 people. And I think they only printed out 500 papers for everyone who was attending as a guest. They were not expecting that sort of show out, but it was people that knew and loved Noah and total strangers who were just heartbroken for his family and wanted to show support. And his family, being who they are, they had no plans to stop fighting for him, to stop fighting for answers. And like Noah, they wanted at least something good to come from this. Noah was the kind of person that rarely got discouraged. He could see the good in all things, and he never gave up. And so they decided to create the Noah Presgrove Scholarship. And this is going to go straight to a Comanche senior. But not just that, the scholarship would also help to provide equipment for kids that can't afford sports gear, because they didn't want lack of accessibility to prevent anyone from living their dreams. It just wouldn't be what Noah would want, which I think that is an absolutely beautiful way to honor him and the things that he loved in life while he was still here with us. There was a wrestling tournament as well to raise money for a reward and a PI, and they also had a car show and a fundraiser as well. And then to help raise even more funds to get answers in Noah's suspicious death, they also started two GoFundMes that, from my understanding, are still active. One, again, to go directly to reward funds, and the other to paying for a PI. There's now 3 PIs working on the case. I don't know if all of them are pro bono, but I know for a fact that one is. Supporters of Noah's and his family also gathered at the intersection of US 81 and Highway 53, where all of them wore red, which is Noah's favorite color, and they held signs demanding justice for him. His family started a Facebook page to try and raise awareness, and they started doing interviews, all in hopes that whoever had information would do the right thing and come forward, because there really was little to no media coverage for the first few months of this case. There's pretty much nothing that I could find, at least on a larger level than immediate local news, until around a month ago. They also had no autopsy report. They had no answers. All they had was the loss of a loved one and a crapload of BS rumors and information to wade through in hopes of one day finding answers. If nothing bad happened at that party, then Noah just somehow crossed paths with an absolute monster in the early morning hours in the middle of nowhere. Imagine that being what you think about every single morning when you wake up. Those two glaringly awful things, no matter which way it went, someone out there is keeping a terrible secret.
7 months is a long time.
Every single day I think about him.
A long time for Noah Presgrove's aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings, and grandparents to reflect on the 19-year-old's short life.
Not a time when you saw that boy did he not give you a hug, tell you how much he loved you.
He was goofy. He was hilarious.
Fearless.
Very fearless.
I've taught him life and about having fun in life, and he's just always been there with us.
It's been a long time to wonder What led to Noah being found dead, lying on the side of Highway 81 in rural Jefferson County after a night partying with friends back on Labor Day?
At the end of the day, what we know is that he lost his life. He was found on the side of the highway, and it appears that he was dumped there. And someone knows what happened, and we want to know what happened.
When you don't have answers, you can't close your heart from that heartache.
We're just not getting no answers.
I feel that we've been pretty much left in the dark for the past few months. They say that they're working on it, but nothing's happening.
Right now, they're just left to guess.
You can't move past. You just keep reliving in the anger.
And hope that someone, anyone who knows more, will feel it in their heart to give this family answers before 7 months turns into 8.
What if it was their child? How would they feel if nobody was talking or saying anything? When you know that your child was with some of his best friends, but nobody knows anything, how would you feel?
The Texas Rangers ended up becoming involved at some point, but they've not directly stated why. And amazingly, OHP ended up successfully getting a 1.5-mile geofencing warrant around the area that Noah was found and the party house. You guys, when I saw this, I almost couldn't believe that it was true, because there have been so many cases that I've looked into where they have wanted to get a geofencing warrant because that alone could help them potentially solve the case. If you're not familiar with what this warrant exactly does or what geofencing is, basically, you can pick a certain time frame and pick a spot on a map, and they're able to see any phone that enters that specific bubble, that little area. And it doesn't have to be from one specific carrier. They don't even have to be specifically looking for a number or just tracing one phone. It picks up everybody. And so you can see how this has ended up being a very difficult thing for different investigators to get, because there's privacy laws. It's a very, very tricky situation. So I'm personally very impressed that they managed to get that, because I've seen cases go years and they're unable to successfully do it. And according to Noah's family, when they got that, they saw 2 phones leave the party house, go to the area around where Noah was found, and then those 2 phones go back to the house. Now, they have not elaborated on this, and I have not seen authorities themselves state it, but that's pretty damn big, okay? So I have no details at all other than that, but I have a lot of questions. Now, could that be the time frame when the partygoers claimed to have gone out to search for Noah? Maybe that's what that is. Or is this potentially when Noah ended up the way he did on the side of the road? And I'm only assuming at this point that authorities have the information from the PI that, certain people claim to go and search for him. So I don't know if they're just trying to corroborate that information, or if they, took that information for what it was and then decided to look specifically to right before Noah was found. Again, just lots of questions and no answers. Now, at this point, the case started to gather national attention, and a bit over a month ago, News Nation started to report heavily on the case, and they have done wonders for it. It is now all over the place. And they also went to bat for Noah's family and the public that had been asking questions for months now. It had been 8 or 9 months, and there was still no autopsy report. It hadn't been released. And usually you see that happen in criminal cases where they'll kind of withhold it. And so maybe that's why they were doing it, but I don't know based on what happened next. Noah's family had attempted to figure out what his cause and manner of death was for months at this point, and were repeatedly told no, because it was an active investigation. But when News Nation went right to the ME's office and asked questions, it was the following day that all of a sudden they had everything buttoned up and ready to go, and they released the autopsy report. Noah's list of injuries is 2 pages long. It is very, very difficult to hear. So if this is not something you can stomach, now is a time to skip ahead. But if you can, I just feel like you really need to understand the extent of his injuries to understand why it is so crucial that he get justice, that someone be held accountable for whatever happened to him, accidental or not. Let's get into it. Noah had abrasions all over his face and neck. He had multiple upper and lower teeth broken, and he also had lacerations in his mouth. So this sounds like he was hit so hard in the head that he bit down on his tongue and lip, but I, again, am no medical expert. He had hemorrhaging in several different areas of his skull, above and below the skull. He had several fractures of his skull as well, including a hinge fracture that apparently takes like an incredible amount of force to do. The base of his skull was described as being cracked in two. Noah's brain had suffered severe trauma in 4 separate areas. There was swelling of the brain, lacerations on his brain, and then we get into just even more endless fractures. He had fractures at his C1, 2, 6, and 7, and your C1 is where your head attaches to your spine. And it wasn't only fractured, but also displaced, which is an injury that you typically see in like rope hangings. He had broad abrasions on his upper back that contained a black material, and it was kind of like a patterned area consisting of longer marks and pinpoint to irregular spots, and that stretched all along his upper back to his left shoulder and down his torso. He had numerous bilateral rib fractures, ribs 1 through 5 and also 8, and all of those ribs, or at least most of them, are usually protected, like they're up high in your chest. It's not very commonplace to break your ribs. They're protected by your clavicle and by your scapulas. It takes a lot of force to break those. And speaking of scapulas, he had bilateral scapular fractures. And I looked into a handful of these injuries just to look at like the common causes of them. And according to my research, bilateral scapular fractures are a very rare injury. And you most often see them in people that experience things like seizures and car accidents, both car versus car and car versus pedestrian, ATV accidents, high falls, and also crushing. So that's definitely something to think about. His T1, 2, 4 through 9, and 11 were fractured. I mean, at this point, like what part of this poor kid's upper body wasn't broken? But the strangest part is that his extremities and mainly his lower body barely had any damage at all. We've got all of this huge list of things that were wrong with his head and his neck and his torso, his spine, like all these areas. But there was just a tiny little segment for the rest of his body. And this is likely a huge reason that they ended up ruling out that this was a hit and run. If you're hit by a car, usually it's your lower body that gets the most damage, at least if you're standing. There's also usually an imprint of where the car hits, an outline of the grille or the car emblems. It's just, without getting too much more graphic than that, very obvious when you're hit by a car. And one of the things that usually happens, again, since you typically get hit on your legs, is you're going to have fractures in your long bones, so your legs and your arms from trying to brace yourself, all these different things, but he had none of that. He had no fractures at all in his arms or his legs. He had abrasions and he had contusions, so not even like lacerations. He had no deep cuts. He just had scrapes and bruises. The worst injury that I have seen of all of that was that his fingertips were shredded almost to the bone. Now, when it came to the toxicology report, Noah had no drugs in his system at all, but his BAC was a 0.14, which we knew he was drinking, so that comes as absolutely no surprise. But I guess there were several rumors that he had been using drugs that were kind of circulating amongst the other pool of rumors that were out there, and his family really wanted to be able to lay that to rest. Now, the ME ultimately ended up announcing that his cause of death is from multiple blunt force injuries, like multiple, but the manner of death is undetermined. These detailed results just added fuel to the fire, in my opinion. A singular impact from a car had already been ruled out, and now looking at all these injuries, you can see why. This is extensive, repeated blows all over his upper body. But just after this was released, the Highway Patrol ended up coming forward and announced that they're not looking into this as a murder investigation. So, how exactly do you unintentionally cause these kinds of injuries to someone without hitting them with a car or an object repeatedly? And in that case, it would be intentional, so it would be murder. I just have no idea what that leaves left on the table. And I'm hoping you guys can see something that I am missing, because I have been racking my brain, and for some reason, I'm just not coming up with anything. And this was really confusing and frustrating because according to Dalen, the authorities had just told him that they had potential suspects in mind prior to this announcement. I mean, it sounded like they were about to go in. Like, they had information. They had said the words foul play to him. Like, the family just thought, I think it was going to go one way, and it went a complete other. But authorities did very clearly state that this was not the end of this investigation. Something still happened to him involving someone else, and they plan on figuring out what. And this is even confusing based on their own theory that they had presented, that he was pushed from the back of a moving truck, because that right there seems to cover intent, which puts it in the category of murder. So how do you unintentionally forcefully push someone out of a truck? I have so many questions, you guys. I just don't know what they're theorizing at this point that would fit that bill. The only thing that my brain will come up with here is vehicular manslaughter. It's not intentional, so it's not going to be considered murder. Multiple experts have come forward since to give their own opinions as well. Forensic pathologist Dr. Michelle Dupree stated that all of the evidence and his injuries seem indicative that he was potentially attacked elsewhere and his body placed in that location after the fact. Maybe some of his injuries that he got are from whatever may have happened to him before. Maybe all these injuries aren't adding up to one, easily wrapped in a bow incident, because they're from multiple incidents. Maybe he got injuries that he sustained from the ATV accident, and then he also has injuries from someone possibly harming him, but then he also has injuries from potentially falling out of the back of a truck, and mixed all together, they don't make a whole lot of sense. And so I think that's possibly where this idea is coming from, that he was attacked elsewhere and his body was placed in this location or thrown out of a car. I think a lot of people have believed this is a possibility when looking at photos of the area that he was found. Again, there's this serious lack of blood for what you would at least expect to see given his injuries. I'm not saying there was no blood at all in the scene, but from what has been said and pictures that I've seen that were taken after the fact, there's just not really a lot there. All of his, teeth, all of his necklace pieces are like perfectly a few feet away from his body. A lot of people have also pointed out the fact that his pants were folded allegedly near his body. Now, I personally think that it's possible police or someone on the scene maybe grabbed them without thinking, and once they realized what was going on, they folded them and set them down. I don't know if that's documented anywhere. Maybe that's part of the lack of documentation that his family has spoken about. But again, for this to be as brutal as it was, even if it was just like vehicular manslaughter and not like intentional murder, I just find it hard to believe that all of his teeth, his shorts, the hair, all of that was found within just a few feet of him if he had some catastrophic thing happen to him right there. I also find the placement of one spot of blood to be curious. Now, I want to preface this saying that so far, it seems that no one can really confirm that this is blood at all or that it's Noah's blood. And I guess this has been a point of interest for at least people who had been on the scene that day and after the fact. But regardless, there's this area of what appears to be blood several yards closer to the party than Noah's body was ultimately found. It just seems like odd placement. Like there's nothing at all, and then there's this spot, and then there's a massive stretch, and then there's all of the pieces of Noah's jewelry and his teeth and Noah himself. And so I don't know, something about that just sticks out to me. I can't even begin to describe to you why exactly, but I figured I'd put it out there. Dr. Dupree also pointed out the lack of injuries to the lower portion of his body, the fact that there was a lack of debris at the scene, the fact that he has several injuries on both sides of his body and not just one, and the sheer number of fractures in his skull. A former CSI also came forward and pointed out the strange fact that his pants were off, but his shoes were still on. Typically in a hit and run accident, according to the CSI, the clothing is pulled off and shredded, and more often than not, shoes are typically knocked off your feet. The shorts were completely clean and free of blood, indicating they likely weren't on him when whatever happened, which I guess supports the other theory that he was kind of tossed out along with his belongings. There are no signs they got caught under a tire or were ripped from his body at any point. There's just nothing, and his shoes were also still on, had no signs of being scraped. I don't know if there was any blood on them. I don't think they were damaged according from what I've seen, as if he had been rolled around on the ground repeatedly after being hit or thrown out of a car. Also, if you've ever worn Hey Dudes, that sucker will fall right off your foot. just looking at it for too long. It's weird that it stayed on during such a huge impact that would cause the level of damage done to Noah. And I think the only debris or anything that was in either of those shoes were in the shoelaces. There was like some grass and some dirt. Noah also had gravel in the wounds in his back, and that paired with the patterned injuries led the CSI to believe this was possibly a crushing injury, which I had mentioned this when it came to his bilateral scapular fractures. And honestly, that is horrific to think about. I think the suggestion here was that maybe the pattern injuries along his upper back and down his left side were maybe a tire mark. I have unfortunately in the past been run over by a car, and I can tell you from personal experience that I had a tire mark on my leg for the next few weeks. But I feel like if it was tire marks, that would have been stated. And since a hit and run was ruled out, clearly that's not what they think the marks are, which bring me to the next expert. Dr. Joseph Scott Morgan from the Body Bags podcast, which by the way, if you do not listen to that podcast, absolutely do. He is a certified death investigator and he gave his opinion. And he said that he has been on the scene of parachute failures that have had less injuries than Noah. Like he has seen some things and he still is absolutely shocked at the extent of damage to Noah's body. He believes that those patterned markings on Noah's back are possibly from being dragged on the road or gravel. According to him, this produces a very distinct marking. And if he was tied at his ankles and dragged, maybe that could explain why his lower body didn't have that many injuries. However, I feel like it would be more likely if he were dragged that you would see those injuries on his pants or on his butt maybe. I don't know. It's like nothing is quite fitting perfectly into place. But tragically, it could also explain why his fingertips were shredded. Maybe Noah was desperately trying to grab onto something. Dr. Morgan also said that he doesn't think it's likely Noah was thrown from the back of a vehicle like authorities had speculated at one point. He said that even if Noah was thrown from a car head first, that he wouldn't sustain that amount of different blunt force injuries all over his head. And he also would have extreme damage to his lower body and extremities. Noah's injuries are from all different angles and directions. He wasn't just hit once, no matter what he was hit with. He endured 5 to possibly 10 injuries that on their own could have killed him, and he had all of them at the same time. Jack eventually did come forward to News Nation as well to do an interview in hopes of, I guess, clearing the air and clearing his name, because there has been a lot said about him, a lot of speculation, and a lot of fingers pointed at him since he was Noah's best friend and one of the first people on the scene.
I ran over here, asked him if Noah was okay, and the semi-truck driver had his hands on Noah like this. And so I just kind of, and I could just tell, that he was not okay. He was laying on his side, and he just had his eyes closed, And he had a cut on his forehead. Like, it wasn't just like terrible, it was just a cut on his forehead. The top of his hair was scraped off his head, and there was blood on his ears. 100% in my heart think that he was hit. I think he got hit on the top of his head by a semi. And that shoe that was on good just stayed on. I don't know. I can't explain any of it,
Is there any part of you that believes that he might have been beaten to death?
No, he was not beaten to death.
Why not?
Because just the injuries, you just could tell he's not. And I said, okay, I'll take a polygraph test. I took the polygraph test, and it was nerve-wracking, of course. I had these 2 things on my fingers. I had a butt pad and then a feet thing and these things around my chest. And I didn't even get to look at the guy. I was looking straight forward, and he was talking to me, asking me questions.
There's a lot of online chatter, and I think that's the reason why they're asking for you to take a polygraph test about you and your father. Tell me about what that experience has been like for you to have to handle that type of discussion happening all around you.
I think the reason that I got brought into it is because, going through high school, you did not hear Jack's name without Noah and Noah without Jack. We were just always together. He lived with us for a while, and we were just always at each other's houses. And I think when everybody heard something happened to Noah, they just said, "What about Jack?" And just, I don't know. I don't know where all the crazy talk's coming from. Just sucks.
Do you feel good to kind of be past that a little bit with the polygraph test?
I mean,
do you believe that you're past that or no?
People saying stuff. I mean, people are saying like it's easy to pass a polygraph and stuff like that. It's just, I don't know. Like, you can't really control what people say about it. You know, you just know what you know. And I've put my personal number on Facebook and said, if you want to talk about it, I'll talk about it.
So what has these last 7 months been like for you?
I mean, it's always been the hardest time of my life. And on top of other people saying everything, it's just been the hardest time of my life.
And more people have also started to slowly come out since then. On May 23rd, a friend that had been at the party came forward on the Justice for Noah Presgrove Facebook page. And this person said that he was actually the one who owned the Hey Dudes, the one that Noah was wearing when he was found. But he had more than just that information to give. He said that he had been asleep when suddenly at 5:15 a.m., he was awoken by Jack bursting through the door saying that Noah was dead. He said he woke up a few other guys in a panic and spent about 2 minutes looking around for his missing Hey Dude before ultimately he ran to the car and raced up the road to see what was going on. And he said that he was at the scene for about 2 to 5 minutes before someone ultimately told him to leave. Now, I don't know if it was authorities that told him to leave, if they were or were not there yet. This is just the basic information, and I will have the comment for you to look at yourself, and you can go on the page and just see it for yourself. And from that point on, he said that he went back to the house where he claimed that everything just continued on as if nothing had happened. And this is something else that has been very heavily denied on social media by others at the party. Now, his statement has gathered a lot of interest, understandably, because this Facebook page had grown very, very large, and everyone was just like sitting and waiting for someone to say something, for someone to give some sort of insight. And on top of that, Noah's family has put a lot of, trust in this guy and has been very supportive of him and the bravery that it took for him to come forward and say anything in this tumultuous situation. And some of the details that he added throw a lot of things into question. First of all, he claimed in his comment that Noah was wearing black shorts when he arrived on scene. And considering he was found naked with white shorts by his body, obviously, this doesn't match all of the other reports. And he said he was confident enough in that detail that he would take that all the way to court. Now, I know that Noah was wearing black shorts at the party itself on Sunday night. That has been confirmed through video, but so far, this kid is the only one on scene, at least before Noah's family arrived, that has mentioned any clothing being on Noah or the clothing not matching the white pair of shorts found on the scene. Now, the other largest piece of information was that Jack burst in saying Noah was dead at 5:15 a.m. And I know I'm a big timeline person. I pay very close attention to times and dates and, things adding up. I'm sure you guys know this because of the way that I organize all my videos, but a lot of people were shocked at this because this 5:15 a.m. time frame would indicate that Jack knew of Noah's death far before the trucker had even passed him, far before 911 was called, and that obviously creates some issues, especially because Jack texted his dad, which there's proof of it online. I think it was his dad himself that posted it. Anyways, he texted his dad around the exact same time 911 was being called by the truckers, asking his dad to bring him a hat for their planned fishing trip, saying he was running behind and he would meet them there. And this gives the impression that he had no idea that Noah was dead at this point. And this was at 5:50 something. And now this guy is saying 5:15, but potentially 40 minutes earlier, Jack already knew. So again, I'm sure you can see how this got a lot of attention and speculation. But the more I've sat and thought about it and looked at it, I feel like there's a huge possibility that this kid has his timing a bit off. The truck driver and other white service truck weren't on scene until 5:50 something in the morning. If Jack woke this kid up at 5:15 saying that Noah was dead, and by this kid's own account, he only spent a few minutes waking up some other people and a few minutes looking for his shoes, and then he ran to his car and quickly drove a mile down the road, the truck drivers wouldn't have been there yet. I mean, I doubt that would have in all taken him even 15 minutes, bringing us to around 5:30 in the morning. And that's still a good 15 minutes before anyone showed up and started to call 911. Now, it may be possible that he did wake up at 5:15 and maybe he just got there a lot slower than he thought, or maybe he was woken up later than he actually was. I have no idea. I'm not saying that I think this guy is lying or that he's making things up. I just don't think that logistically it's making a lot of sense with what is factually known in terms of the timeline. And I think it is absolutely important to look at that and think about it because that's implicating something pretty dang big. But given the absolute chaos that has transpired on social media, the silence by a lot of people and the arguments and threats that a lot of people have gotten from saying anything at all, I, highly applaud this kid for even publicly coming forward to be put on the stake by everyone possible. Because I know that that was not easy at all. And when you live in a small town like that, I mean, they're all seeing each other at the grocery store, at the gas station, they all have kids still that go to school together. And then on June 24th, just a few days ago, another person came forward. And this time it was the man that found Noah, the trucker. Now, I've seen that he potentially posted on another Facebook page prior to this to tell what he saw, like his side of the story, but I have not been able to find that anywhere, so I cannot confirm that. Now, the truck driver ended up coming forward to speak to the Daily Mail, which I just want to say I very rarely use them as a reference unless I'm taking like pictures from them because they are essentially a tabloid. But people also spoke on this, so it seems like this information is out there otherwise, so I'm going to say what he said. This man said, quote, "I was the one who found the body. So yes, I can say 100% that nobody messed with Noah. I was the first person there." He claims that he and the other truck were the only ones initially at the scene. And then he claims that shortly after this, Jack showed up and he was the only person to approach Noah. And this was the reason that Noah was identified. But he said, other than that, no one touched him, no one messed with him, nothing at all happened. He was naked when they got there. He was the first person on the scene, and that's that. So as you can see, people are still coming forward to share information, and the case is more active now, at least in the public eye, than it ever has been. And I'm hoping that maybe because it is so active and because more people are starting to come forward, it will encourage the right person who maybe has more helpful information. We could probably sit here and speculate endlessly as to what happened to Noah, but as rough as this has already been, I'm not diving any further into it. Bare minimum, what we know is that police still believe something happened to him involving someone else, albeit possibly accidental. But that still means that someone knows what happened to him and is not speaking up. And I don't understand how you can know what happened to this 19-year-old kid with so much life ahead of him, and you just leave him on the side of the highway to be found by whoever passes by next. Members of his family have been interviewed on the Full Load podcast 3 times, and most recently in early June, they said that at this point, they're just struggling to wade through rumors and speculation in an attempt to get to the truth. And that's what took me so long to even get this up. I was supposed to have this video out on YouTube a week ago and ended up just like in the trenches of this Facebook page and Reddit and just trying to piece together what was fact, what was fiction, what was rumor, what was not, because at this point in this case, I had no option but to kind of share some of the speculation and rumor out there under the premise that like it is rumor. I cannot prove this as fact. It has not been proven as fact. And it was a lot to go through, you guys. I mean, I spent days and days and hours just down this rabbit hole trying to sort through this all. So I can't imagine what his family's going through, what authorities are going through. No wonder there are 3 PIs on this case, because you guys, what I've said here is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of rumors. And unfortunately, quite a lot of it is just not even based in fact. It's just some theory, some rumor that someone cooked up because it just sounded interesting. And that's been really challenging for his family to have to hear all of the different ways someone has randomly decided to theorize that Noah was killed. It's just not helpful at that point. It's really damaging. They are doing their best to continue speaking about Noah. His Aunt Robin is very active in interviews, as well as the Facebook page. His brother Dalen's also out there, his sister Madison, his cousin Ashley. They're all doing everything they can to try to get to the bottom of this. And on top of the 3 PIs that are working on the case, the FBI has apparently also started to work alongside OSBI and the Highway Patrol. They've not taken over the case, which I've seen falsely stated, and I handful of different areas, but they are involved, which I'm hoping means that they need some of the FBI's resources potentially. I know in the Caleb Harris case, the FBI has come in and they have been doing some crazy stuff. They've cloned Caleb's phone. A lot of technology has been looked into, and I think that's kind of what the FBI is being brought in for on a lot of cases nowadays. So maybe they're sifting through phone information still. They're doing more geofencing. I've got no idea, but I'm hopeful that means that they're trying to narrow something down to figure out what may have happened. As far as I have heard from his family, as of all of their last interviews, ultimately they all seem to believe that something happened at that party that night. And people that have the information need to be brave enough to come forward with it, because this will be found out at the end of the day. They have faith that law enforcement is doing all that they can right now to try and get to the truth. Things are rapidly changing in this case, and as you've seen just in the past month, so much has come out. I mean, it's been 9 months of nothing, and now we've got the autopsy report, the full one at that, multiple expert opinions. We've got 2 different people that have come forward more publicly about what they have personally seen. I just think it's going to continue being that way. So keep an eye out for updates on social media, and please keep Noah's family in your thoughts. This is a fight that they have been experiencing every single day for almost a year now, a year of having no idea what really happened. So I encourage you guys to support them in whatever way you can, whether that's following the Facebook page and offering words of support. If you're local, I'm sure they will have more fundraisers. I know that they are selling things like t-shirts and hats and things like that. Or if you're able to, please donate to their GoFundMe so that they can continue to push toward answers. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and go, you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to Noah's story. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Hallan fam so we can bring them home together or bring them justice together. And I will see you guys in my next video.